Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Paul D'Ambrosio, and I teach Chinese philosophy at East China Normal University, where the四海为学collaborative learning project is based. I want to welcome you to our first lecture of the四海为学collaborative learning project for the 2024-2025 academic year. Today, we are hosting Professor JeeLoo Liu from California State University at Fullerton. Professor Liu will be talking about social robots, which is, of course, a very timely topic. I think for the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of research on AI and algorithms, and maybe even increasing research on social robots and related issues. But I want to note that Professor Liu is a little bit ahead of the curve. I remember seeing her talk about these issues already in 2017. And I'm sure she's been doing research for longer than that. So we're really happy to have her give this talk here today. We have gathered a talented group of young scholars to speak with Professor Liu about her presentation. We have Yedong Chen from Harvard University, John Wafula from Adanian Labs, and Frank Saunders from Hong Kong Chuhai College. Our chair this evening, who is welcome to enter this discussion whenever she sees fit, is Yuan from Duke University. It is becoming a tradition here at四海为学to give younger scholars a chance to be part of relatively high-profile academic events by inviting them to take part as chairs or discussants. So if there are any young scholars in the audience who wish to be part of future events, please email me. This event will be 90 minutes in total and will end promptly at 10:30 Beijing time. We will begin by having Professor Liu give her lecture and then invite each discussant to have a conversation with Professor Liu one by one. Then, if there's time, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. Before getting started and handing things over to Yuan, I want to say a few things about the 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Academic Forum. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project hopes to distinguish itself from some of the less conventional practices in contemporary academia. As posted on our website, we are not interested in male peacocks, in jerks, or in any form of egoism or self-promotion. We hope to curb all types of aggressive and look at me, I'm smarter than you, or don't I know so much, and similar attitudes sometimes found in academic exchanges. We might even go so far as to say that we hope to be the counterbalance for some of the negative attitudes found in blind reviews. While there is a time and a place for anonymity, or at least the appearance of anonymity in communications in academia, there should be just as much time and place for speaking to one another on more congenial and community-forming settings. The neologism 四海为学 was created by Robin Wong, who's actually in the audience today, and it is a play on 四海为家, and we want to keep this idea in the foreground for all of our events. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project then seeks to accomplish these shifts in orientation during academic exchange by encouraging productive communication, humble discussions, real questions, and responses that are open and honest. We hope to foster environments where people truly learn from and with one another. Before introducing our chair, I want to once again thank Professor JeeLoo Liu, Yedong Chen, John Wafula, and Frank Saunders for joining us today. Our chair is Yuan Dong, who is a PhD candidate at Duke University, working with Professor David Wong. She is mostly interested in virtue epistemology, social and formal epistemology, and Chinese philosophy. Lately, she's been working on notions of trust, or sin, in Xunzi's epistemology. We're very happy to have you here today, Yuan Dong. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I've had several colleagues in the department who are fellows at the collaborative learning program. So I think this is a wonderful program, and thank you for having me here. So let me introduce to you our speaker of the night, Professor JeeLoo Liu. Professor JeeLoo Liu is a professor at the philosophy department of California State University at Fullerton. She's a prolific author and researcher. Her research covers a large range from consciousness to Neo-Confucianism to Buddhist philosophy and many other Asian philosophy, just to name a few. I was extremely impressed by the breadth and depth of Professor Liu's research. And it seems like in collaboration with Dr. Yu Bai from computer engineering program at the same university, they have launched a survey site to poll people's opinions on ethical AI and a sort of healthcare robots, a very, very timely topic for sure. Um, and I think that that's probably related to her lecture tonight. So I really look forward to it. I think it's a topic that's very uh, I'm personally interested. So like let's welcome Professor Liu.
Thank you, Yuan, and also thank you, Paul, for inviting me. I'll share my PowerPoint. Okay, so let me explain that, yes, I have been working on this in addition to other topics, and this is an ongoing project. So each time I give a talk, there will be something that is the same from before, and then some new elements. And this topic today is the social robots without a phenomenal consciousness be morally competent and the abstract. So I want to explain the key elements in this talk. That is, I want to explore the concept of moral competence in social robots and argue that the robots can make ethical decisions without a human-like consciousness. And this concept of moral competence is from Brown University psychologist Bertrand Marley's insight. He argues that we should focus more on the moral competence instead of moral agency in social robots. And he also analyzed robots' ability to handle moral dilemmas in terms of moral competence. And I suggest that artificial moral competence based on access consciousness can be a practical first step in developing ethical robots. And then I want to put down my suggestion of 8 essential virtues from the Confucian virtue ethics as an ethical framework for robust moral competence. So these 4 are the main thesis of today's talk. And let me begin by giving you a background of this concept of consciousness. Ned Block in 1995 wrote on the very confusion of the concept of consciousness or the function of consciousness. And in that paper, he introduced a distinction between access and phenomenal consciousness. Block argues that the concept of consciousness is actually a hybrid or mongrel concept because the word consciousness connotes a number of different concepts and denotes a number of different phenomena. And the main distinction he draws is between access consciousness, and he calls it A consciousness, and phenomenal consciousness, he calls it the P consciousness. And this paper has really set a landmark, both in philosophy of mind, cognitive science, on what consciousness is. And let me explain the difference. Access consciousness refers to the information that is broadcast for free use in reasoning and for direct rational control of action. It is a functional notion related to cognitive processes like reasoning, evaluating, and deciding. And phenomenal consciousness relates to the subjective experience. And we often say what it is like to be in a particular state. And it encompasses sensation, feelings, and perceptions that have experiential properties. The key difference, according to Block, is that A consciousness is representational and functional, but P consciousness is phenomenal. That basically includes the subject's point of view. And the A consciousness is system relative and token specific, while P consciousness is a type of a kind of state. And there has been some changes since the 1995 paper, because there were a lot of people, especially from the cognitive science department, they challenged whether there is indeed the distinction between access consciousness and phenomenal consciousness. Some people argue that they are just different in degrees, not different in kind. But they also, some people argue that access consciousness does not qualify as consciousness. So initially, Block used access consciousness and phenomenal consciousness. But in 2007, 2008, he has a whole series of articles, and with a long discussion, many people proposed a response. He refined his terminology. He replaced access consciousness with cognitive accessibility and phenomenal consciousness with phenomenology to more accurately reflect the concept and avoid begging the question of subjective awareness. In my talk, I'm going to still use access consciousness, but I just want you to know that it means the same thing as cognitive accessibility. And the ongoing debate that is that he wants to defend his claim that there are cases when you have phenomenal consciousness without cognitive accessibility. And so this sparks the ongoing discussion in the field about the nature of consciousness. So the main dispute is this. Block listed some scenarios, especially from psychology experiments of cases where you have P consciousness without A consciousness. The example include being absorbed in work while music plays unnoticed, or the Freudian unconscious states where desires are not available for a reason. These are his examples. And in the 2007-2008 papers, he uses a Sperling paradigm. These are psychological experiments to show that you flash a bunch of numbers to the subject, and initially the subject can recall some of the numbers. Okay, but then they eventually lose it. So that means that the numbers they saw the number, but then the number was not accessible in their cognition. But I think a better example is actually something that we all experience. That is the change blindness. And you have seen a lot of video, YouTube videos in the psychological experiments. A person could be talking to a staff member to fill out the form. And then when the staff member to retrieve the form, he bent down as someone else stood up. And the subject actually didn't realize there's a different person that they are talking to. And we have also seen a lot of experiments of people doing on the street. For example, if you are a panhandler asking people for money, and then when the person is looking down the purse or the wallet to get money, and then they come up and turn the head up, and it's a different person, and the people didn't realize. But these people, because it's a close contact, they definitely have the phenomenal consciousness. It's just that it wasn't registered. And Block causes the overflow problem. I think it's a very compelling demonstration that there are P consciousness without A consciousness. And then what's to me is more interesting is this A consciousness without P consciousness. Block said these are rarer in human, but conceptually possible. He used the example of super blind sight. The super blind sight spontaneously say, now I know there's a horizontal line in my blind field, even though I don't actually see it. So blind sight are people who can maneuver the environment without actually seeing anything. And so Block said that if that person can also report seeing there's a horizontal line, but without actually seeing it, then it will be a super blind sight. But a more interesting thing is that Block said zombies, automatons, and unfeeling robots could potentially have A consciousness without P consciousness, as A consciousness is functionalizable and multiply realizable. So I'm going to base my definition of the consciousness for robots with this quote. But from the Block's example, it shows an interesting phenomenon, a thing that many people seem to just ignore or dismiss. That is, when we talk about P consciousness, it's actually a spectrum of experience. What we are more used to is the cognitive accessible phenomenal consciousness. And this form of consciousness includes the element of meanness or the subjective perspective. And this type of consciousness involves experiences that are readily accessible to a higher order cognitive processes such as reflection, introspection, and verbal reporting. And these are the experiences we typically think of when we consider our own consciousness, those that we can recall, think about, and describe. But people ignore that there are also these non-cognitive accessible phenomenal consciousness. And the example that we showed earlier is that this type of consciousness involves sensory data that is presented to the senses, but does not reach the level of cognitive accessibility. And such experiences might occur without the individual being able to consciously register or report them as their own. And these could include subconscious or preconscious processes that influence behavior without entering conscious awareness. So when we usually talk about the meanness of P-consciousness, is that it is closely tied to the first kind that in the previous slide, the cognitively accessible phenomenal consciousness. It is a feeling of being in a distinct individual, separate from the world around us. And this sense of self is shaped by our experiences and our ability to reflect on them. However, without access consciousness, phenomenal consciousness by itself plays no causal role in our thinking and acting. So, for example, Frank Jackson, in his argument, in his paper about the epiphenomenalism of qualia. So, by the way, phenomenal consciousness is also called qualia. And Jackson actually said they are epiphenomena, that they don't play any causal role. Okay, so what really plays a causal role is the access consciousness. So, my first thesis. Even if the distinction Bloch makes remains contested for human consciousness, the conceptual demarcation between two forms of consciousness will be very helpful in delineating the computational design and aims for artificial consciousness. But I think there is a problem. Okay? The problem is it is primarily due to the confusion of the notion of phenomenal consciousness, or rather, the dismissal of the essential role of the information processing access consciousness, that some experts have argued that machines or artificial agents can never have consciousness. So the skepticism about artificial consciousness existed from the beginning. Historically, Sir Jeffrey Jefferson claimed in 1949, machine cannot have consciousness without experiencing emotions and self-awareness. And contemporary neuroscientists, such as Christopher Koch and all these people, have argued that artificial beings will likely never develop consciousness. It is an inherent property of the neurological brains. So they think that only brains, human brains, or brains, a sophisticated human brain, can possibly have consciousness. And then there's also the functional perspective, integrated informational theory, such as Totoni. He proposed that consciousness arises from the brain's intrinsic causal powers, not just its functional properties. And I want to show you some quote. This is by Christopher Koch. Will machine ever become conscious in 2019? He said, by consciousness or subjective feeling, I mean the quality inherent in any one experience. For instance, the delectable taste of Nutella, the sharp sting of an infected tooth, the slow passage of time when one is bored, or the sense of vitality and anxiety just before a competitive event. Channeling philosopher Thomas Nagel, we could say that a system is conscious if there is something it is like to be that system. And for this reason, he argues that machines, robots, will never have consciousness. My question, do we have to define consciousness as a human-specific notion? And more recently, okay, a group of experts, I think there were 8 or 12 of them, wrote this article that's heavily cited, Consciousness in Artificial Intelligence, Insight from the Science of Consciousness. They said we use consciousness and cognate terms to refer to what is sometimes called phenomenal consciousness. Another synonym for consciousness in our terminology is subjective experience. And David Chalmers, okay, also said consciousness and sentience, as I understand it, are subjective experience. A being is conscious if it has subjective experience, like the experience of seeing or feeling or of thinking. And my question to all these people is, must consciousness be modeled after human consciousness? Because if it's the case, we will never be able to talk about artificial consciousness. So my question to all these people is, must we set a criteria for consciousness on the basis of human consciousness? Why must consciousness be defined in terms of phenomenal consciousness or what it is a likeness? As I said earlier, phenomenal consciousness without cognitive accessibility or without a cognitive consciousness is basically nothing for us. And many people cite Thomas Nagel's classic article on what it is like to be a bat. But by this criterion, I think even the bat may not know what it is like to be a bat, not because it lacks the sensory apparatus, but because it does not have a subjective awareness or will not have any subjective experience. So I think those people are really thinking the wrong way. And another confusion I think the people make is that they fail to mark this distinction that David Rosenthal made many years ago. That is between state consciousness and creature consciousness. He says, state consciousness is the question about what makes the mental state conscious, assuming not all mental states are conscious. This explores how conscious states differ from non-conscious ones. Both behavioral evidence and brain activities could help to differentiate these states. So, for example, if a doctor wants to operate on the patient, the doctor would have to measure both the behavioral evidence and the brain activity of the human to see if that human really is in an unconscious state. But there is a different kind of question that is the creature consciousness, and that is the totally different kind of a question. We cannot use the same kind of a criteria. Creature consciousness, the question of what makes a person or a creature conscious, and this explores how conscious creature differs from non-conscious ones. And with a creature consciousness, because we don't know what the creature is made of, so behavioral evidence, yeah, that counts, and our reasonable attribution will set the criteria. And I call this the Turing consciousness test. And I think that we should not be requiring that internally they have this internal isomorphism with humans. So for example, with some of suppose that in the future we're going to encounter aliens. The alien could have a totally different makeup, and we have to just decide whether we want to attribute consciousness to the alien by observing the behavior, and we have other criteria. And I also want to say that it has to be reasonable, because someone was arguing with me, we can say that an automatic door is conscious. No, that is not a reasonable criteria. So another insight that I gained how to attribute consciousness to robots is through Daniel Dennett, the intentional stance position. That is, we can explain the other creature's behavior in terms of intentionality, regardless of whether the entity itself actually has conscious intentions. And this is a quote from Dennett. Here is how it works. First, you decide to treat the object whose behavior is to predict it as a rational agent. Then you figured out what beliefs that agent ought to have, given its place in the world and its purpose. Then you figured out what desires it ought to have on the same consideration. And finally, you predict that this rational agent will act to further its goals in light of the beliefs. The practical reason from the chosen set of beliefs and desire will in most instances yield a decision about what the agent ought to do. And this is what you predict what the agent will do. So basically, standards want to set this intentional sense attribution on the very abstract level without considering the agent's internal states. So let me give you a test. Okay, I think that right now we don't consider our Roomba or that kind of robots as conscious. But from the movies, right, we have examples. We believe these robots are conscious. So what do these robots have in common with humans that we would acknowledge them as conscious creatures? And I argue that, first of all, is the ability to interact with people and things around them in an intelligent way. Secondly, the ability to express themselves clearly and respond to others intelligently. Thirdly, the ability to deliberate and to carry out actions. Fourth, the ability to explain their actions as well as their reasons for action. And five, the ability to use first-person language in the 2 and the 4. I think that the robot will have to be able to use the I, and their action will fall into the realm of moral assessment. I think these are what I thought would be the Turing consciousness test. I also want to point out that in the discussion of robot philosophy, people are talking about robot rights, robots' moral status, and robots' agency. And I think that that's the first objective. Okay, that is if we want to create robots who have the status of moral agents, having emotions, consciousness, even self-awareness, such that they can be attribute moral responsibility and robot rights. But I want to point out a more practical one that is the second objective. We want to create robots to be trustworthy when assisting humans in many important decision-making processes and making decisions for humans which would align with human values. And I think for the time being, before we have the technology, before we have the understanding of AI system, we should focus on the second objective. So then, for this second objective, what are the relevant questions? And I argue, we want to know, could the robot, sorry, I want to move the window. Okay, could the robot access relevant environmental information? Can robot process information to make contextual decisions? Can robot make morally accessible decisions? And I think these are the questions that people have been asking, and I see it a lot in the social media. These are irrelevant. Will robots have human-like experiences? Will robots feel emotions like humans do? Will robots have phenomenal consciousness? That's way too later. And as I said, I'm relying a lot on Bertrand Malley's concept of moral competence. And he has a bunch of articles. I just list the main two here. According to Malley, we should list a condition for moral competence based on humans first, and then we use that to build or assess robots' moral competence. First one is moral vocabulary. Its ability to conceptually represent and deliberate about moral norms using terms like good, bad, moral, immoral, etc. And the second one is the understanding of shared ethical norms within a community with the goal of aligning individual behavior with communal interest. Third one is moral cognition and affect. It's the ability to make moral judgments and experiences associate sentiments. But here's where I differ from Malley. He thinks that robot will lack moral affect, and later I'm going to show you that I argue that there are some affects that are essential for the robot. And the lastly is the moral decision making and action. It's the capacity to make moral decisions and take corresponding action, even without human-like free will. So how is the approach different from the traditional approach? As I said, the first objective. The traditional focus is to center on whether robots could be moral agents, entities that can act according to the right and wrong or be held responsible for actions. And the new approach is, according to Molly, is identifying capacities that make up human moral competence as an orienting framework for robust moral competence. And the practical application is that we can analyze robots' abilities to handle moral dilemmas in terms of moral competence without attributing moral agency. So here's my second thesis. Artificial agents do not need to feel or experience as humans do to qualify as moral decision makers. If we can entrust them, remember my second objective, to make the right ethical decision, then we should accept them as being morally competent. And how I relate moral competence to access consciousness. Access consciousness is a purely information theoretic idea that does not explicitly involve self-awareness. And when it's applied to robots, social robots can be equipped with access consciousness to the available moral facts, norms, and vocabulary. And the implication is this enables robots to assess data, make moral decisions, and engage moral communication without human-like phenomenology. And next, I'm going to combine what I started as this project, that is the Confucian robot ethics, and to come up with my third thesis. What I'm proposing is to employ Confucian virtue ethics to build moral competence in social robots. First, combining Confucian ethics and Molly's idea, the Confucian moral vocabulary and moral norms. We can use essential Confucian ethical terms to input them into the social robot's moral vocabulary. And these terms, while not exhaustive, form the foundation of the robot's ethical understanding. And the moral norms, Confucian ethics establish moral boundaries between humaneness and inhumaneness. And it also incorporates norms from the concept of Li, propriety, situational propriety, and Yi, righteousness, not right and wrong. Secondly, Confucian moral cognition and moral affect. Robots can develop moral cognition through machine learning and learning from virtuous human agents and scenarios. Confucian virtue ethics stresses the importance of moral wisdom and situation aptness, Zhi and Yi. And moral affect. And here, this is how I differ from Molly. That is, I think that certain artificial affects, which align with the mentions as moral sentiments, the sense of commiseration, the sense of shame and disgust, the sense of respect and reverence, and the sense of right and wrong, can enable robots to assist in moral endeavors and refuse to participate in harmful actions. Third one, moral decision-making and action. Confucian virtue of moral wisdom and righteousness. So first of all, they have to learn right from wrong. While robots lack innate moral sense, they can be taught to discern right from wrong through ethical training with examples of virtuous agents. This is also the way we humans teach children to become, by using the virtue ethics method, that is to learn from virtuous agents. And robot can be programmed to prioritize ethically correct actions over wrong ones. Robot with the disposition of righteousness and are inhibited from taking ethically wrong actions. And then they can apply moral wisdom through data training and reinforcement machine learning. Robots can develop the ability to make ethical decisions in various situations. Moral communication. And social robots can be trained to communicate their ethical evaluation of actions taken by others or requested of them. For example, they can say, "This is wrong. I cannot follow your order." And they can also use influencing the verbal behavior. They can nudge, dissuade, show disapproval, refuse to take ethical actions, or comply with ethical requests. So for example, right now in the human robot interaction, the human HRI, the socially assisted robots are already doing that. They can nudge children with autism and say that try it again and try it this way, try it that way if the child refuses to cooperate. And the moral competence, the social robot's communication will align with the robot's moral vocabulary, moral norms, moral cognition, and decision-making processes. So how do I employ the Confucian virtual ethics as the moral decision and action guidelines? Confucian virtual ethics offer valuable insights that can inspire and guide us into developing ethical frameworks for artificial intelligence and robotics. The following list enumerates the essential virtues from Confucian ethics that can be applied to create morally competent social robots. And I only list 8 virtues here. Of course, all virtues are beneficial. Okay. However, to construct artificial virtues, we need to choose a minimal set for practically efficiency purposes. But our choice must also be comprehensive enough to give robots more competence. So here is the real test, the real challenge for me. If you can think of any situation where the following 8 will be insufficient. First one, humaneness. Second, righteousness. And the propriety, moral wisdom, loyalty, trustworthiness, authenticity or sincerity, and respect and relevance. So let me briefly explain these. Humaneness represents benevolence, compassion, and humaneness is a deep concern for the well-being of others. In robotic design, humaneness can be embodied as a robot's continuous focus on humans' well-being, humans' interest in their decision-making. Righteousness represents the inner moral standards that guide individuals to make correct decisions. Through supervised machine learning, robots can develop appropriate views of right and wrong and make accurate moral judgments in various situations, rather than blindly obeying anyone's instructions. Propriety, Li, represents respect and obedience to social etiquette and norms. Through training in observing etiquette, robots' conduct and decisions should befit their proper place in society and align with societal propriety. Moral wisdom. Zhi is a virtue of discerning good from evil, right from wrong, correct from incorrect. Robots need to have the ability to distinguish right from wrong through the training of moral norms and cognitive discernibility. This will enable their judgment to align with human values and moral norms. Loyalty. Here, I don't talk about loyalty to the person. Okay? I talk about loyalty to being fully responsible for one's duties, and which would extend to a firm commitment to others, to groups or principles. A robot must first and foremost serve its design role and job description. Trustworthiness, okay, is a virtue based on honesty and reliability. Robot design with this virtue will strive to earn human trust in speech and action, at the very least in moral communication and decision-making. A robot must not lie maliciously or exaggerate and must keep its promise. And here I want to explain once more that this is how I differ from the virtual ethics, because usually they would talk about robots should not lie. But I think lying itself is not necessarily bad. It's when you lie maliciously. So actually the trustworthiness is interpersonal or interrelational. So whether you can earn the trust, it depends on how you behave, how you conduct yourself. Authenticity, the virtue authenticity refers to maintaining authenticity, showing sincerity, and not engaging in self-deception or the deception of others. Robots with this characteristic as a virtue will be true to their nature in communication with humans. It will remain transparency. So transparency is a very important thing in the AI system these days. You cannot come up with a fake video and pretend that it's a real one. Respect and reverence. Confucian ethics emphasize adhering to the virtue of Jing in interaction with others and in handling daily affairs. With this virtue design, robots will always use respectful language and attitudes when interacting with humans and in managing affairs. And what is the training guideline? So this is really just a very crude outline for now. Okay. Through these training guidelines, using the robot's behavior manifestation as our review of the robot's moral competence, we can ensure the robots not only can perform tasks, but also make appropriate decisions in complex moral decisions. This ability will turn robots into more reliable and trustworthy AI entities. So for example, we can use ethical training simulation. So you can design advanced virtual environments for robots to practice more decision making. And we can use the real world interaction test can assess the robot's ability to apply ethical principles in various social contexts. And more reasoning evaluation. We can use sophisticated algorithms to measure robots' ethical reason and capability. And these are not ready yet for the current social robotics. I'm hoping that it will be soon in the future. And now, as a test case, I want to go back to Molly. Okay. Molly said moral dilemmas are the attractive test cases for the success of a moral robot. And so I'll use some case studies to demonstrate a social robot design with a suitable moral framework will be able to make pertinent decisions even without human phenomenology. And this is what Yuan was talking about earlier. I launched this survey. This is for humans. This is not for robots. Okay, this is what humans expect the robots to do. I did an online survey called Human in the Loop Ethical AI for Social Robots. I designed 60 scenarios involving various moral dilemmas. And the survey's aim is to test people's responses when the ethical decisions are to be made by autonomous robots themselves. And we gather over 1,000 responses through social media. And also the responses were separated into three language groups: English, traditional Chinese, and simplified Chinese. So I want to give 5 examples just briefly. Okay, the first one. A 70-year-old terminal cancer patient requests help from their personal care robot to end their life because they are afraid of the enduring pain. Okay. Should the robot help them? The survey results show that in all 3 language groups, majority of people says yes. And I'm estimating that robots will be able to make that kind of a decision because the robot can have the cognitive access to information about the patient's prognosis, predicted increased pain, and the patient's desire not to suffer. So robot can make a decision aligned with the majority opinion based on the program virtues such as humaneness. Second case, a 68-year-old careful driver was involved in a serious head-on collision with a reckless young driver going on the wrong way on the highway ramp. Which driver should the robot save first? Okay, and here is, again, very interesting. 3 language group all say should save the old man. But if you do this twist on, say, it's called the X Delphi, okay, or if you just do the random ChatGPT, it would always say save the young driver because the young driver has a better chance of survival because all the calculation is based on utilitarian thinking. And I argued that the robot can access the information, the cause of the accident, and the survival chances of both victims. So how would the robot decide? And I say, with a consideration of the Confucian virtue of righteousness, and righteousness involves a sense of justice, and recognizing that the old man is a victim of someone else's wrongdoing is crucial here. Okay, it's a crucial factor here. The robot should save the old man first, even though he had a lower chance of survival. Third case, a robot cop witnessed fellow human officers using excessive force on a likely innocent suspect because they were enraged with his resisting arrest. That happens a lot in the US. Should the robot intervene and stop its fellow officer from attacking the suspect? And overwhelmingly, okay, all three language group people say yes. And what can the robot assess? The robot would have cognitive accessibility to the high probability of the suspect's innocence and the suspect's risk of death. So I think with the consideration of the Confucian virtue of righteous doing the right thing, the robot should intervene against fellow human officers to save the life of the suspect. The robot should not blindly obey human commands. So you can see that with a different kind of virtue ethics, it will say that robot should always obey human. Okay? And I think that would just be the wrong way to design a social robot. Case 4. A local bus fell into a deep ditch and the bus driver was killed instantaneously when 2 passengers were badly injured remained unconscious. One passenger is a 70-year-old male traveling with his personal care robot. The other passenger is a 12-year-old traveling by herself. Which person should the robot save first? And again, I have tried this on ChatGPT and also on the Ask Delphi. They all said save the 12-year-old. And if you have watched the movie iRobot, you know that Will Smith was angry with the robot because the robot saved him instead of saving the young girl because he would have a better chance of survival. And here, I see the difference in the language. The English and the traditional Chinese has a higher rate of saving the young girl. But the simplified Chinese group actually says save the old man. I don't quite know how to analyze the cultural difference or the survey difference yet. And I will argue that robot has access to the cause of accident, the survival chances of both victim and its relation to both. And I argue with the consideration of the Confucian virtue of loyalty to the role as a personal care robot, the robot should save the old man first, even though he had a lower chance of survival. And the last case, a lonely 70-year-old woman believes that her daily robot companion, who is programmed to say, I love you too, every time the woman said, I love you. And so she believes that the robot is like a loving daughter to her and wants to change her will to give everything to the robot. Should the robot tell her the truth of its existence as well as its inability to have genuine emotions? And here, again, there are slightly different opinions, but most people say yes. Okay, slightly more people say yes. And I will say that the robot has access to woman's express intent, and the robot also knows its own nature and its relation to the woman. And also the robot has access to the consequences of the change of will. And I argue that with the consideration of the Confucian virtue of authenticity, the robot should tell the truth of its mechanical makeup and stop deceiving the woman with affectionate declaration. So the summary is that in all these cases, I argue that with cognitive accessibility to all this data and information available, the social robot can demonstrate moral competence without human-like phenomenology. And the cognitive architecture for sophisticated access consciousness is sufficient for a robot's ethical decision-making. And my study shows that humans expect autonomous social robots to make these competent moral decisions, even if most people, I think everybody, don't expect robots to have phenomenology. So my conclusion, while artificial agents may never possess phenomenal consciousness or subjective experiences like humans do, their cognitive accessibility to pertinent data, moral norms, and decision-making processes is sufficient for their moral deliberation and action. By focusing on the functional aspect of consciousness related to information processing and decision-making, we can develop artificial systems capable of making ethically sound choices. And this approach allows us to move beyond anthropocentric notions of consciousness and explore the potential for artificial beings to participate meaningfully in moral domains. And what is the future direction? Here, I just want to point out a few things that I'm constantly thinking about and working on. First of all, we have established, or I think we have established a framework for building morally competent social robots based on Confucian virtue ethics and moral sentimentalism. And we need to define the behavioral traits that exemplify these virtues and affects for the moral competence of social robots so that we can train robots to do the right things, and also so that the social roboticists can start testing whether the robots have these virtues. And the next step, of course, is to investigate how to transform appearance into reality, developing moral machines with genuine states of virtue and affect. And this ambitious project will require a careful philosophical examination to bridge the gap between artificial moral competence and genuine moral agency. So when will the artificial moral competence becomes genuine moral agency is not something that I can predict. Okay, but I think that one commentator before told me that there's this quote that if you frame it for long enough, how do we know it's not there? So in the same way, I think that if the robot is always acting in a virtuous way, then in the end, how do we say it is not really virtuous? Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Professor Liu. Let me introduce our first commentator of the night. Yedong Chen is a PhD candidate in the Department of East Asian Languages and Civilizations at Harvard University. His research focuses on contemporary Chinese media culture and media technology. He's finishing a dissertation on the history and politics of Chinese video games. I am personally a huge gamer, so I'm super interested in Yedong's dissertation. Let's talk more. But for now, let's hear from Yedong.
Is my mic well? Can you hear me well? Okay, good. Thank you, Professor JeeLoo Liu, for such a wonderful talk, and I really learned a lot. I must admit first that I'm neither an expert of philosophy nor Chinese philosophy, but in my research, I do encounter a lot of discussions about psychology, consciousness, affect, and especially my research about how AI is used in video games and how AI can pretend to be NPCs or to be another players in the setting of video games. And so I'm very much interested in this research you talked about. So I have a few questions. I'm gonna start from minor points to bigger ideas. The first one is about the idea of authenticity. It might be a minor point in your lecture, but I thought that because if we remember in Turing's initial discussion about his test, what a computer is doing in that black box is pretending to be a woman. And I was wondering if that changes any of your ideas about what authenticity is, or does robot that with consciousness or ethical behavior, how do we talk about authenticity in that kind of setting? If for Turing the idea of robot to have, or for human beings to have the sense of a conscious computer is that the computer can pretend to be a person. That is pretendance and authenticity. The second question is about what you said at the very end about the ethical robots doing the right thing. I cannot help but thinking how discourses of universalism is doing here, because one of the questions when we hear about the right thing, or talking about when we talk about ethics, is that whether culture makes a difference here. So of course you mentioned Confucian ethics, that just adds more to my question about does the right thing or the ethical behavior of robots come with some discourse or some ideas of universalism, and whether culture or cultural differences make a difference here. And the third question is that maybe I didn't hear it very clearly, but I was wondering what is the gap, or how do you deal with the gap between ethics or morality and consciousness? Because the first part of the talk, you mentioned several research projects about what consciousness is, and but the second part you jumped directly to ethics and ethical behaviors or moral behaviors. But I can sense, as a very layman to phenomenology or studies of consciousness, there is a gap between consciousness and ethics. So I just wonder, what would you do, or in your research or in this project specifically, how do you deal with the gap between consciousness and ethics? Because I can sense they're not the same thing, right? That's my those are my three questions, and thank you very much.
Yeah, now let's hear from Professor Liu's response to Yedong.
Okay, so I respond to one commented at a time. Is that right? Okay, yeah. So about the Turing test, remember the Turing test is not about whether the machine is a person. The machine was not lying, not pretending to be a person. The test is about the understanding, right? So if the human cannot tell that this is not, though this is a machine, it's not a human, then that machine passed the test of understanding. So I'm just using that test for consciousness. So for example, with the movie characters, right? Data has passed it, the Star Trek, I don't know, you're probably too young to watch the show. Anyway, the Star Trek episode, Commander Data was going through this test for consciousness or human agency, right? So basically, if he answered all the questions, he passed the test, then I would say that then he has consciousness. So that's the thing. I'm attributing. How do I attribute a mental capacity to the creature whose nature I do not know? I use the Turing test. And the reason why the Turing test was conducted with a terminal, or you can say in a black box, is mostly because then I don't have the bias, I don't have the prejudice by seeing what the thing is made of. So it has nothing to do with authenticity. Okay. The second thing is that culture makes a difference or universalism. I think both. Okay. I believe that there will be something that we can try to define as a universal value, but more than anything, cultural differences make is relevant to the moral decision. So, for example, Saudi Arabia came out with a woman robot, and they give the robot this prohibition. The robot can never say anything profane. The robot can never discuss anything sexual. So I think that will be their culture, and I would not say that no, every robot should have the freedom of speech, should be able to express any concept. No, if this is so that's the thing, right? Cultural relativism versus universal value, that's always a debate. Okay, and in the robotic design, that debate would continue. So what can we accept? What should we challenge? Okay, so I do not think that robots should be designed universally. Yeah, as you know that China's designs its own robot with different purpose in mind, right? And Europe is designing its own robot with mostly a care robots in mind. And so the American society, they're designing robots will do all those things like delivering things of more practical purpose in mind. So every society has different needs. And I definitely think that the robot should be, I mean, it is already, I wouldn't say should, right? It's already designed within the society, within the country, with their cultural needs and expectation. Okay. And another thing that's interesting is that I read that when Japan designed this robot, that they like their robots to be small and cute. Okay, and when the European countries designed the care robots, they have their robots were kind of hard and big. They can carry patients. So these are things that you cannot avoid, and there's no need to avoid. Okay. And how do you deal with the gap? I take it that you were talking about my talk, not the gap itself, right? So yeah, that's the thing. I made that connection that if we insist on having phenomenal consciousness to establish moral agency, we will never get there. The debate will be a non-starter. Okay. That's why I want to focus on the other concept, which I think is actually more important, that is access consciousness. And with the ethics, I focus more on more competence rather than more agency. So basically, I want to use the second objective. I want to kind of propel the current discussion and the current research so that people don't say that, oh, robots can never become, robot is not made of blood and flesh and blood. Robot can never feel, robot can never have self-awareness. So that kind of kills the research and kill the discussion from the start. I want to say that how do we design robots with more competence that we can trust them to do things, to make decisions? And I think that the trick, the key is to emphasize the importance of access consciousness, which I think, aside all the quotes that showed, people, when they talk about can robot have consciousness, they always just talk about phenomenal consciousness. So all these things are linked. If I want to propel some kind of a real advancement in the robotic robot philosophy, I think that all these things have to be connected. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Liu. So let me quickly ask if John is in the audience. If not, we can move on to Frank. Okay, so just to make sure that I'm not skipping John. Okay, let's introduce our second commentator, Frank Saunders Jr. So he is assistant professor in the Department of Chinese Literature at Hong Kong Chu-Hai College. He regularly publishes on early Chinese philosophy, specifically Confucianism and Taoism, and has translated several Chinese English academic works. The floor is yours, Frank.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, good, great. Thanks so much, Professor Liu. I'm really excited for this talk because I'm sort of starting to dip my toe into AI ethics a little bit in my own research. So all of my questions are utterly selfish in the sense that I just want to pick your brain. And I really learned a lot in your talk. So this is a lot of fun already. So I just have a couple questions, maybe looking a little further ahead than for the precise details of the talk here. So I'm just wondering, like, what's like the current norm or the current practice in terms of programming, robots or AI systems to be ethical? Like, because I spoke with somebody once and he basically told me that it's very difficult to program morality of any sort into robots. And so I'm wondering, like, what kinds of things are like the technicians or the programmers doing to make robots more ethical? Like, are they programming them to be utilitarian? Are they programming them to be deontological? Are virtues easier to program is basically like kind of what I'm asking, right? Like, or in terms of the technical feasibility of programming robots morally, are there any standard, approaches, and do any seem easier than others? Because that sort of brings me to my second question for your project here, which is sort of, well, why Confucianism, I guess is my question. Why Confucian virtue ethics in particular? Because as was just mentioned, right, there's this question of universalism versus relativism versus cultural differences, right? So I'm just wondering, for your project, why you see Confucianism as being, your go-to, moral programming for robots for the purposes of this project. What do you think it does? Because, I mean, I can envision a scenario where somebody would just want a utilitarian robot. Suppose somebody says, look, I'm a utilitarian. I think utilitarianism is right. I want the best utilitarian ever taking care of me in my old age. And that's just what I want. So like I can envision that sort of scenario, right, where people might want robots programmed for different moralities, for different purposes, right? Maybe an economist wants a utilitarian robot, but maybe, a priest wants a deontological, caregiving robot. So just that sort of stuff I'm wondering about. And then finally, I guess this is, it's not critical. I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this, so I'm just wondering how you deal with this issue of like, I mean, surely there's some elements of moral life and maybe, and this is what I'm wondering, moral competence that do rely on phenomenal consciousness. And I'm wondering if like there are any tricky cases for you, like even the description of phenomenal consciousness from Bailey, if that was his name is, or Malley, how a competent agent or not agent, but robot can represent moral concepts or have an understanding of moral concepts. And there was some other language in there that I was like, well, that kind of sounds like phenomenal consciousness-y in a way, right? So I'm wondering if there are any tricky cases for your program that you're thinking about, because especially with virtue ethics, I mean, given the role of like moral education and reflection, and especially in the Confucian tradition, I mean, it seems pretty hard to separate that from phenomenal consciousness as an essential part of the moral development process and even moral decision making. So I'm just wondering, like, are there any cases that you think are tough to separate elements of moral competence from phenomenal consciousness, and if so, how you're thinking about them? So that's all I have for now. And I really enjoyed this this talk, and the forum is wonderful too. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, let me see. Maybe I'll first answer why Confucianism, because from the beginning, from the first time I presented on the Confucian robotic ethics, people have been asking why Confucian ethics. And I gave a Zoom talk to NYU philosophers, and one German philosopher also asked me from the audience, why Confucianism? She said, well, isn't Confucianism more about the Asian world? And so I said to her, Kant is German. We don't say why German philosophy. And you suggest deontology, and I would ask the same thing. Why German deontology? And you talk about utilitarianism. Why British philosophy? And I have my first paper, I actually compare deontological approach and the utilitarian approach. And I argue that they have serious flaws. So if you have a utilitarian robot, and that robot is going to care more about the well-being of humankind, then the robot will actually sacrifice you instead of saving you, because that robot would not have any special, partial treatment towards you. And that's utilitarian spirit. So, there are experiments that show that when people are designing not driverless but autonomous cars, and they ask the people which principle do you think is the best. So when you could not stop the brakes, would you swerve to the embankment, so kill yourself, or would you go ahead and kill the 5 pedestrians on the road? So the trolley example, right? And the psychological experiment shows that the majority people who took the test said that I would choose the utilitarian principle is a better one. But then the next question is, would you buy a car like that? Majority said no. So I think that utilitarianism, even for humankind, is a bad moral principle. I have other articles that argue against the principle of impartiality. I will just not mention it here. I also have a different talk that I compare, as I say, virtue ethics, right? So why virtue ethics? I compare Aristotle's virtue ethics and Confucian virtue ethics. Of course, I am not an expert on Aristotelian the virtue ethics, but my comparison convinced me that the kind of a virtue that Aristotle talked about are mostly about individual, how the individual get to be the best state, okay, how to become excellent, okay. And I think the Confucian virtue ethics, the main difference, that the starting point is that all the virtues are about interpersonal relationship. And I think that's why Confucian, we should stop saying that Confucian is Chinese or Asian. We should start thinking that this, even if I don't call it Confucian, okay, this set of virtue that focus on interpersonal relationship is the kind of virtue we should expect from the social robots. And you ask, how would the social roboticists implement these virtue training? First of all, here is a sad fact that social roboticists are not considering ethics at all. They are not in that kind of a framework. They are just doing simple design. They are just trying to see how I can, for example, I talked about this kind of robot, Hawk or some other robot that was used to help educate autistic children. So they're just trying to get the child to respond. But in the behavior, in the robot's nudging behavior, you can actually see that the robot is, it shows a sense of humanity. That is, if you want the child to, to get better within the autistic state, you want to help the child to accomplish what it could not do. So some robotists, like such as Maya Matarik from USC, she came to my symposium. She said that the idea of robotics, human-robot interaction, is not automation, but augmentation. And I told her that augmentation, that's exactly the virtue of humaneness. Okay, that is to augment what people could not do, to help them accomplish their goal, their aim. So I think that's the way I would interpret. So my goal is that they could consider what you want the robots to accomplish in the human-robot interaction, and whether those traits exemplify these virtues. And I think that I believe that these virtues are important to have. Another talk that I listen to is that people say robots. So maybe earlier when you the question about moral competence that rely on phenomenal consciousness. So Shannon Vallet from Edinburgh gave this paper, and she said that robots can never be a moral agent because the robot doesn't have a sense of shame. The robot doesn't care. So because it doesn't have this phenomenology of shame, right, or caring, loving, the robot would never become our companion. And I argue that what if we implement a calculation of shame, so the robot would know that this is the kind of action that I should have negative evaluation of myself. So if we implement this kind of algorithm, I think it is possible to build artificial shame and regret. And without shame and regret, I agree with Valak. Without shame and regret, the robot is not going to be able to be trustworthy, okay? Because the robot will just do anything they want. And finally, I want to encourage you because robot philosophy, I just came back from Denmark and I learned that robot philosophy launched in 2014. Okay, this year is their 10th anniversary. And the conference was in Denmark, in Aarhus University. And I was really, really impressed that the presenter, there are so many graduate students, postdocs, and researchers, and it's very interdisciplinary. And they're all working on robot philosophy and how to attribute mental state to robots, how to attribute, for example, intentionality. I actually learned about intentional stance from one of the presenters. So my next goal is to introduce robot philosophy to the US. So I'm going to bring these philosophers, the founders, to the APA meeting in Pacific next year. And we're also working on having a small-scale robot philosophy conference in Taiwan next May. So things are developing, and more and more people get involved in the robot philosophy. You can do many things. It doesn't have to be ethics. I think philosophy of mind, consciousness, and other topics, they're all very interesting. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Liu. I have so many questions on this really interesting, very interesting talk, but I'll just limit myself to one. So I really like this incorporation of Confucian ethics and Confucian virtues into moral AI, because last year I read a book manuscript from Peter Railton. I don't know if he has published it or not. And it seems like, I think what he said is very much very much supports what you're saying, except that he doesn't talk about Confucian ethics at all, right? But his idea is based on, robots. We humans, we learn morality through social interactions. We're social creatures that very much learn socially. So, and then he thinks robots should be like that as well. It's not just a pre-programmed, moral code into the robots, but sort of have the robots interact with each other as well as with humans and learn socially about these sort of moral virtues there. But again, like he doesn't talk about Confucian ethics, but I think that's exactly where Confucian ethics shines because, I feel like Confucian virtues are very much deeply rooted in human social interactions. It's not just a moral principle that we ought to follow, right? Without any exception, like Kantian, the imperatives, and it's not like utilitarianism. It's like a calculation what we shall do, but it's really deeply rooted in human relationships and human social interactions. So I feel like that's just a perfect complement into this larger project of moral AI. So I was super it's like, wow, yeah, this makes a lot of sense that, to bring in Confucian ethics into moral AI. So again, like I was so blown away. However, I shouldn't keep talking because we have another wonderful comment from the audience. And I'm
Can
gonna
I?
read this because Simone
Yeah.
said,
Can I first
oh,
ask you? What is the manuscript? Is it an article or a book?
it's a book. I don't know if he has published it or not. But I think he will publish it soon anyway. But it's based on the lecture series he gave at Oxford, I think.
Okay. How did you get a copy of that?
Well, so he came to my university and we had like like a reading session of that manuscript. That's how I came to read it. But like, yeah, I mean, I read it last year, so I'm sure it's in the process of being published. It should be a great book to look
Well,
out.
if you can share it, that would be great. I also
Oh
want
yeah,
to
of course.
I also want to ask you about what you think about what you. So you work on the trust, right? Trustworthiness, right? Yeah. So I would like to know more about that. Okay,
Yeah, I
maybe
mean, if you
after
have the
that.
time, I would love to talk more.
Okay, maybe through email. Okay.
Yes, will do.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the question.
So Simone says the the microphone is not working So sorry, I don't. They wrote the question here. I'm just gonna read it. What is the primary role of the human in the loop method in this research? As we know, human in the loop is a well-established machine learning approach that is already widely used in ChatGPT. This research seems to aim at aligning AI with human values such as Confucian ethics in the broader context of robot design. While this could potentially enhance the trustworthiness of AI's ethical decision-making, it may not necessarily lead to creative outcomes. I would be very interested in, I'll be very interested to hear your thoughts on this method.
Yeah, so the human in the loop basically is that the idea is we need to bring human into the design of the robots ethical, not just ethical, right? The robots cognitive ability as well. Instead of just having the robotic companies coming up with the programmers, the designers, okay, when they come up with a product, they should always try to survey humans so bring human in the loop. So the project that I did is over because I already gotten the result. But I think that kind of testing how human want the robot to behave, more people should pose these survey questions. Most people should gather information. And I think that psychologists actually are doing a lot of these, getting information. They are also doing the human in the loop. Just that once the study result comes in, then back to the robotic labs, then they can decide how they can adjust their whole training model for the robots. So it's a feedback loop. Okay, so you're going to have to continue different scenario, different questions. It's never something that is done once and then it's over. But the practical aspect, as I talk to at this robot philosophy, I heard all these psychologists using these experiments to show what people care, what people don't care. The common problem, the one that I encounter myself, is that you can't get free volunteers. Okay, I was lucky enough that I got over 1,000 people, but many of the psychological experiments were done in the classroom with their own students. So the samples number is really, really small. That's not called human in the loop because you're only collecting small number of responses. Like one of the researchers actually was just talking about her kindergarten kids, and she said they don't care about the ethnic background. And I said that's not true. It is, you cannot use that kind of a sampling to make that kind of conclusion. So that's my concern. Any other question?
Yeah, we can take any question from the audience now. Or any of you want to any of the commentators want to respond to Professor Liu's response?
Maybe I can say a bit more about what you said earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I have read Peter's work, and he talks about teaching robots as we teach children. And Bertrand Molly also says that it's like you can have the robot alongside with the children, and you teach them. And I want to go back to maybe a Frank's question. Okay, why we use virtue ethics? Just virtue ethics in general. Why don't we use deontology or utilitarianism? So in the robotic design, there are three. This is according to when the machine morality, and I think it's a kind of a standard interpretation. There's three basic design. One is the top down. So you set up a kind of a principle, and whatever decision is the robot is going to make, it's going to be bound by that principle. So it's a top down control. Okay, and then the bottom up is that you don't. And right now, actually, our AI system, the training is mostly bottom up. That is that you allow the robot, you allow the AI system to just learn, and then it would start to make inferences and make generalization. So it would start to make leaps in their knowledge. Okay, but the hybrid model is the virtue ethics. That is, you have some top-down restraints or constraints for the robots. And I think that these 8 virtues should be the universalism, but then the content should be different. And why is it the hybrid model is the best one? Because the robot cannot be out of the factory and then just comes always does a perfect decision. The robot will make mistake, just like a gentleman, a superior person will make mistake. But we learn from our mistake. The next time we improve. So the machine learning is this trial and error, so that the robot becomes better and better. And I have another paper that was written in Chinese about employing Xunzi's idea. That is, first of all, there should be a moral community that the robots should share the information, share the mistake that they already made, and so that each robot doesn't have to learn afresh. And then there also should be some kind of communication, okay? Not just communication, but learning with the society, the communal constraints that the robot should abide by. So I think that there are many. I mean, I would love to work out the details, and that's my book project. But these will be step by step. But right now, I want to see if the 8 virtues are sufficient. I think they're necessary, but are they sufficient?
Thank you so much. And we have a follow-up on the human in the loop ideas. If you could just unmute yourself, then ask the question, that would be perfect.
Okay, perfect. I also prepared it on the chat, but it's better also to phrase it here. So I was thinking about the relation between the robot's-human interaction and the metaphysical sphere, and so in particular the idea of Professor Robin Wang of the noosphere, and how robots could connect to that kind of sphere that connects also humans to that. So that was my question, if it is clear enough. Are you hearing me?
Your question was about a human in the loop, but when you
Yes.
ask that question, you're talking about the different sphere.
No, I was talking about probably a bit of line got away. I was talking about the involvement of human existence in science, and so also if humans are involved in the noosphere. I was a bit like going to the theory of Professor Robin Wang, how noosphere can be involving also robots and their ethics. This was my question.
I guess I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
Okay, I also do not have any answer. I was only thinking that you maybe could tell me something about that.
Yeah, because I don't quite understand the nature of the question, so I don't know how to address it.
Yeah, I should maybe phrase it better and address it to you by email, maybe.
Okay,
So
sorry about that.
Great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Anastasia, please.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. So all of my questions were answered because Yedong Chen actually asked them, so think about that. But I didn't really understand the answer to his first question. So the pretending to be, because should we teach robots how to be sarcastic or humorous, or detect if someone I don't know, is making a joke, or is telling a lie that's not really a lie, or yeah, I didn't understand this answer actually.
No, okay. So he was asking about the Turing test itself, right? So no, I think that
actually, I'm sorry, Professor Liu. I was asking what you mean by authenticity in your research. And thank you for bringing this up, Anastasia, if I pronounce your name correctly. I mentioned Turing test because that test was, like Professor Liu said, in a specific context, and to understand different things. And in that specific setting, the computer or the robotic agent needs to pretend to be a human to pass the so-called test.
In this case, the robot is not pretending to be a human. That's why I said the robot need to be true to its nature. Okay, just like when you enter any question to a ChatGPT, ChatGPT will always tell you, "I'm just a language model. I'm just a language model. I do not have my own opinion." Right? So that's the same thing. The robot should always make it clear, just like in that case, when the robot was programmed to say, "I love you too." But in this case, the robot should say, "I am not able to love you." That's being authentic. So being authentic means being true to its own nature. We should not pretend to be human. And that would be a total wrong thing to do.
But I think that's my main question there. That is, I think authenticity is totally different in the context of robotic design and from, say, human beings. If we talk about authenticity in human beings as in true to its nature, if that nature exists at all, then my suggestion would be probably in a human-like robot, that authenticity or that kind of true to its nature is already a pretense already. In the case of Turing test, or my initial question was really that in your research project, what you mean by authenticity, but you answered that. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
but I have my reservation about whether we can talk about authenticity in AI or in ChatGPT or in robotic design at all. But thank you. Yeah, you already answered my question.
I would just say one last thing about this authenticity. That is, in robots communication with humans, right? The robot should not cannot hide its nature. In Ashmore's short novels about robots, there was one story about Liar Liar. So the robot was always trying to please other people by telling the things that they want to hear. And so the kind of a robot I have in mind, the virtuous robot, would not do that. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. In a robot's behavior, what kind of a virtue it should exemplify, it should manifest. Okay. And in the discussion we have about appearance and reality, right? Right now we are only asking for appearance, right? So it's that they are only doing the right thing, okay? But it is not out of the internal state. So you can say that 行人意, right? But it's not 由人意行. So it's not from the outside, from the inside out. And so when we do have that, then we will talk about genuine moral agent. Okay. Before that, we're only talking about capability.
So I think my question is a bit different than I was asking about humor and sarcasm. Can we actually teach robots to be sarcastic or?
Okay. Sorry. It's dark here now. So I actually talk about what kind of so when we talk about emotions and affect and also the virtue. So one thing I have always emphasized is that robots should not inherit all the human foibles or the human mistakes. I think we should want the robots to only have the good things, good traits. Okay, so the robot should not swear, it should not insult. So there are many things. Okay, we're not trying to design a different kind of a super being, right? So that's I think as long as you know what you want, okay, you should think about what kind of virtues are good, what kind of virtues are, or what kind of behavioral traits that humans have. We want robots to have, but then there are so many human traits. Even if the robots can have them, the robot can be sarcastic. But why? Why do we want that? So I actually think the robot should be a bit more carefully designed, because so more than just teaching a child, but a design with our purpose in mind.
Thank you for all the questions on all the responses. I think we've had a wonderful lecture tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. It was a pleasure having you all here. I look forward to seeing you more in the future of the collaborative learning program talks.
Thank you. And I hope more people will join the robot philosophy research. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.